and I'll go for King's Pawn. I have been playing a bit more Ponziani recently, but I think in this game I'll go for an Italian. And we see a pretty rare gambit. This is called the Rousseau Gambit, which, as far as I know, should be a little bit dubious, but it does require some precise play from white. So, I mean, of course, if I take the pawn, then black can expand with e4. Probably don't want that, like queen e2 and then d5. So I'm pretty sure the best move here is d4, which I'll go ahead and play. Creates a lot of tension in the center. But I will admit that I haven't really studied this opening so in depth, so really don't know too much beyond pawn d4. But I'm pretty sure that if takes, I can just take on e5 and have a very fine position. So we'll see what black wants to do here. Opponent's taking time, so that's actually a good sign, given that my opponent maybe tried to surprise me in the opening, but perhaps not prepared for d4. Black takes with a pawn on d4, so this gives me some options. I could take back with a knight. I think that might be the most intuitive move. I could take on f5 as well. I could play e5 to try and snag some space. And then maybe if I play e5, then white's the one who's gambiting. But I do like the prospect of taking. Just to calculate some possibly forcing line, if pawn takes pawn, I can take the knight. And then whatever takes back, I think I'll have queen h5. If black has to play g6, there's queen e5. That's a very common pattern to try and win the rook on h8. So yeah, let's start with this. And of course, if knight takes, I can take with queen, support the pawn. So I'll have to check after the game, like what the proper way to play this opening is. But it seems like a very fine position. I have more development, more central control. And sometimes it's not great to bring out the queen early, but in this case, the queen's actually very nicely placed here. Not easy for black to attack. And I'll be ready to castle very soon. Hopefully get a rook to align with black's king. Black plays queen e7. So pinning the pawn. And castling still comes to mind. Would maybe allow black to take. And then I don't quite have rook e1 because the rook's not supported there. So there's another move here to play knight c3. Preventing queen takes e4. And if knight c3, pawn takes e4, then knight d5 looks really attractive. Hitting the queen and the c7 pawn. So I'm leaning more towards that. I mean, e5 is another option, but e5 could run into d6. So yeah, I like knight c3. In these sort of positions, you usually want to look to accelerate development and develop as quickly and efficiently as possible. And if I get to play knight d5 next, then I mean, black might have some issues. Queen d6 or bishop f4. I'm curious what black's going to do here. And maybe queen c5 is an idea to try and trade queens, neutralize any pressure I might have. But black takes the pawn. So, I mean, of course, the normal response is just to take back. But, I mean, knight to d5 looks so strong. I'll just go for it. And now, yeah, the queen is hit. These moves don't work because, yeah, queen c5 I can take and take. Queen d6, bishop f4, nice skewer that will lead to the fork. So I think the only attempt for black is to play queen d8. which is not the prettiest move, basically setting up the starting position. And if we see queen d8, it'll be a question how to put the hammer down. Actually, it might be very simple. I have queen e5 there, hitting the king and pretty much guaranteeing knight takes c7. So we're 8 moves in. I think black's opening has already pretty badly backfired. Yeah, let's go for bishop f4. I mean, just going back to basic opening principles, sometimes if you can develop more rapidly than your opponent, develop with attack, then good things can happen very quickly. That was a very extreme example, winning in 9 moves. So, I mean, there are cases where the Rousseau Gambit can be tricky for white, but in this case it was perhaps trickier for black. So if we go back, let's just see how black should have played. I mean, pawn d4 is the best move. The engine does prefer white here. It gives about plus 1.2. And the best move would have been to take on e4. I would take on e5 and then d5. And yeah, at least here black can stabilize the center. White still has pressure. Yeah, it actually looks good for white, even in the main line, because engine's saying queen d6. And this seems to walk into bishop f4. So might be one of these openings that you don't want to play against someone who knows the best move. If we see what happened in the game after takes and then takes, yeah, black had to be really, really careful here. Apparently knight f6 was best, just to develop and pressure the center. But yeah, after takes, and queen e7, it was pretty smooth sailing from here. Maybe black could have tried c6 here to prevent knight d5, but life was still very good for white.